Welcome back to the Reddish Block podcast. It is I, Todd, and with me today, as always, Andy, the Andy Man. He has some new material for us today. If you recall, we talked about second person perspectives and points of view in stories, and well, Andy did some research and he wrote one, and we will link it in the YouTube description section so you can check it out. But I'm going to throw it over to Andy to talk about this actually pretty cool story.
Well, it kind of just happened. I was sitting Monday night on my bed, just scrolling through different websites that had second person short stories. Cause I know we kind of talked about last week that we were going to maybe read one. And so I had some free time after work. So I decided to do that. And I didn't read the whole short story because it was kind of long, but I kind of got the concept of how to really write it, and the way I described it last week was pretty close to how it actually is. You can, although I think I said you don't really use quotations. I don't know if I said that last week or not, but you can. Found that out. So, long story short, I just started writing, and 5 pages, 1,500 words later, I was like, oh, this isn't actually that bad. So I edited it for 2 days, and then I posted it on my website, I think Wednesday or Thursday of this week. I can't really remember, but I just happened to be in the moment to write, and I cranked I think I've said this multiple times. I've just cranked it out. Like, I've had inspiration and I've cranked it out, and there it was. I was like, wow, okay, that's pretty good. Like, I didn't stop. The only time I stopped was when I ate dinner, and then I went straight back and finished it. But so I enjoyed it, actually. I'm thinking about possibly having a sequel to it, if it's even possible. I don't know. I have to have more feedback of what people thought of the original one first.
I think it's possible. The way that it ended, I think I think, and it's up to you, of course, but I think you can always try to carry that out some more. And like, maybe sometime down the road, or maybe you know, in the past, going back to, what life was like in that house in the past, or, it's a really neat story though. It was oddly like gripping, I guess, in a way where, like, at least for me when I was reading it, I just kind of, I just read it and would go, and it kind of kept me hooked the entire time.
Well, that's kind of like, after writing it, I said, this actually makes it more gripping, like you said, because you're incorporating the reader, you're making the reader feel like they're in the actual scenario compared to um, regular first or third person. But I guess I don't even know. Maybe first person could, like, make the reader feel like you're in it a little bit more. I know we touched on it last week, but definitely, I think I'm going to start writing more second person stories. And the way it ended, it I was going to try to incorporate that ending to a different project that I had, and then I realized it wasn't going to work. And then what I've already started. So I'm like, you know what? Let's just incorporate it into a second person story and just try to see how it goes. Cause I was like, I don't know how it's going to start, but I know how I want it to end.
Yeah,
And then that's how it, I know I don't sound very sophisticated, but it was really not that hard. Really not that hard. But I've also done it before in school. So I've had practice with it. It's been a while, but I've practiced with it.
well, they do say practice makes perfect, and it was a darn good read. I would definitely I'd keep up with it. I might even actually give a second person story a shot.
I mean, you might as well at this point, just to,
Yeah, I
because,
got to keep up
like,
with you.
well, not even that. It's just, you saw how easy for me that it, how, I mean, I texted you earlier in the week. I said, I just wrote 5 pages, and you're like, oh crap. Like, yeah, it wasn't once, if you can get if you have the time and you get in the right writing mindset. I know we've touched on that multiple times,
Mhm.
but it's crazy. It's kind of like a high in a way that you're just focused only in on that. And it actually makes sense.
Yeah.
So, well, I appreciate that you actually read it. I know I had to really promote it again today because not a lot of people have seen it yet, but that's also could be the time and place um, of when people are getting on social media too.
True.
Which I don't know. I never know when a good time is to promote things.
Yeah.
So if someone could leave a comment and tell us how they do it, because sometimes I'll promote something and it explodes, and then I'll do the same exact time, same exact like the same day of the week and time for something else, and then maybe half of what happened before.
I definitely know when
doesn't make sense.
I know when that's watching or listening. If you promote anything that you do, whether it's any form of media or otherwise, what are the factors that you consider when you're marketing that, whatever that it is? Do you consider whether it's, you do it, whether you release it right before the weekend or right directly after the weekend, in the middle of the week, morning, afternoon? Does it depend on the content? Which, I think you could argue that maybe some content would do better in the morning. Some content might do better in the afternoon. It's certainly more complex than 4:30 p.m. on Friday, I suppose.
Well, see, that's funny because I have someone who said 4:30 on a Friday works for them the best, and you're like, okay, let's try that. And I did it once, and it worked. So I'm trying it again now as we speak. I put something on Instagram to further promote my second person story, which is called Irrational, by the way. Self plug there.
Yeah. But Irrational. Find it on your Wix page, which is also linked in the YouTube description.
It is. And you can find it in my Instagram bio and Twitter bio. Yes. And I think on Facebook.
And LinkedIn. Yeah. You can find it everywhere, folks. It's even in the newspaper. Maybe. I'm not really sure about that one. But anyways, also, I was going to say something and I completely forgot. But instead, I'll just say that we have, I was going to say we're officially on Spotify as of, October 11th, I think. We have, as of the time of this recording, we have 3 episodes up there. But by the time this comes out, we should have, 5, I think.
5, yep. Because as we're recording right now, one just dropped. Well, I don't know how Spotify works. Can you drop it at 4? Okay, so then 4. As of right now, there's 4.
Yeah. In about 4 minutes, the 5th one will drop. So
yeah.
Well, as of the time of release. Yeah, I don't know. This is
time is hard. By the time there are going to be a lot more episodes on Spotify.
Time is like, it's not a straight line. It's just a pool of numbers, and it's a mess. But yeah, so on Spotify, I don't think I mentioned it before. Maybe I did, but we have a official merch store now. Also linked in the YouTube channel description. We got T-shirts, we got sweaters, we got aluminum cups if you want those. Hopefully soon we'll have hats. I gotta look into that.
I'm surprised the company you work like incorporated with didn't have hats.
Well, to be fair, I had to personally click on each item to make it available on the store. So I don't remember seeing hats. And I know that some past criticisms of Teespring, the website we use, was that they didn't have hats, but I didn't really look. So I got to check that out. But those are the 2 biggest developments between, the previous week and now, is that we're expanding. We're on 2 platforms now. And maybe soon we'll be on iTunes or Apple something.
Apple Music or Apple Podcasts, yeah.
Yeah. We'll be in the Apple universe at some point.
I don't know how difficult that is, though. Spotify is definitely easier to do, I've been told.
Spotify is extraordinarily easier. Yeah, all you do is upload a audio clip and you're pretty much good to go. But yeah, it's I have to do some more work on that. It's just finding the time. But yeah, so those are some big developments. We got a new story by Mr. Andy Man here. We got new merch. We got new platforms. we're going places. We're making it.
We're trying our best here. We're trying to get more Twitter followers. I think we're up to 5. Well, 3, not including us, 2.
And at 5 followers, it's me, Andy, and then my 3 alternate accounts. But I'm just kidding. But yeah, well, so that's a lot of good news. But I do have some unfortunate news. Now, if you've been a fan of the show since the beginning, you might know that we've talked about the book Hatchet for a little while. Not long, maybe a little bit. But the author, Gary Paulsen, passed away this week at the age of 82. This man wrote over 200 books. He was actually working on a book when he died. It's supposed to be coming out next year, I believe. I think it's called The North Wind or something like that. But yeah, so that was, unfortunate for sure. I honestly, the more I think about that Hatchet book, it kind of exists in a vacuum of time with me. Like I don't even know, like I didn't really know when it was written until recently, somewhat recently. This is a book from my childhood that could have been timeless. But any thoughts or comments
no. Once when I saw that, I was like, it took me a second, and I was like, oh, wait a minute, I know who that is. And then I was like, maybe I should go back and actually read Hatchet again, or try to read part of the series and then report back and see if they're all the same, or like to connect back. Are they all cliched wilderness videos or radio narrations?
Oh, what's equally interesting is probably like reading just his life story. I very briefly read some of his childhood. He was born in 1939. His dad went off to World War II to fight. His mother was not really in the picture. I think she was doing something, and so he was kind of fending for himself. And so like some of the obviously some of the writings that he did in Hatchet and many of his books, he had over 200, came from his lived experience as a kid, doing things on his own. I mean, couldn't have been easy, fending for yourself and growing up in the 40s like that with, rationed resources, missing parents, I think his dad, I don't know if he was probably drafted into World War II, so he's kind of just fending for himself. So it's an interesting story, worth looking into. And he has other books, other like popular books besides Hatchet too, which I can't remember. I think I don't remember, but worth looking into. But any final thoughts on the passing of Mr. Paulsen?
Just another sad loss in the literary community, I would have to say.
Yeah, indeed. Well, yeah, it's unfortunate, but life goes on. Who sang that song? Oh yeah, life goes on. Long after the thrill. Never mind. It's not John Mellencamp, I think. I don't know.
Probably. I mean, that's all you listen to is John Mellencamp.
Not true. I don't listen to him at all, except for where I work at.
Yeah,
although I have seen him in concert once, a long time ago. Wasn't too bad. It's pretty good actually. But enough about my uninteresting life. Let's talk about something that the viewers and the listeners actually want to listen to, not our rambling bull crap. I'm not going to curse because this is, of course, a family-friendly production. Let's talk about titles. Those things at the fronts of books. How do we choose title names? What thought goes into that? Do you pick it, like for you, I guess, do you pick it like right before you start writing? Is it something that's always in the back of your head, or do you ever approach the end of the book still unsure of what the title is?
Honestly, it depends. Like with my latest short story, it was pretty easy to call it that. Irrational. I think because I use that word a lot.
A little bit.
With that was on purpose. Obviously, it was on purpose, along with
completely rational thing to do.
Yeah, that was good. But yeah, obviously, but for like my novel, I have a couple saved, but they're all like, I don't really like don't really like them. So I think for me it all depends if I can come up with something witty on the spot or I have to actually write out the story or a sequence and then be like, okay, I can call it this or that. But I it's kind of tough because my a professor in college said never try to don't create the title until the end.
Really?
That's what he always told us. Yeah, because 9 times you can, and you have to come up with at least five or six because, or I think was it five or six? It might have been even 10. But he's like, because 9 out of 10 of them are going to be crappy. But
Yeah.
you'll have that one that actually works, sticks out. And I've come up with very bad titles in my time of writing. But what about you? How do you do it? I know there's
Uh,
probably definitely a different way.
well, for it's kind of I don't have like a one definite way of doing it. Like my very first novel, Fairly Human, um, I think I picked that name like really early on, because the idea was that I had these creatures in the story called ferals, which were basically my version of zombies. And the main character, spoiler alert, if you ever plan on reading that book, uh, the main character kind of, you know, he doesn't become a feral, but he kind of gets he he's bitten by one of the ferals and he gets the virus, and so he ends up like the name Fairly Human was supposed to be a play on being a feral and also being a human, and so I came up with that really early on, and I just always liked it. Now I will say that my when I picked the name, I had a different story planned than when I finished the book, so I can understand the idea of uh, maybe I shouldn't have stuck with that name. Maybe I should have picked a different one. I could go through like all my old writing notes to explain exactly what I mean by that, but the underlying connotations of Fairly Human being like somewhere in the middle was more pronounced in my original outlining and less so in the final product. But in my second book, I think it was called the Enigmatic Martian. I think I picked that one early on too. It fit perfectly with the overall story in the beginning and after I went through edits and rewrites, and then after those two, everything kind of changed. Where I wouldn't pick the title of the book until I was like almost done, or after I was done, just because I couldn't come up with a title that I actually liked. My most recent novel is called Somewhere Somehow. I ended up naming it after one of my favorite songs, just because it kind of it worked as a title. And the song itself I actually talk about in the book, but it was something that came way later than anything prior. And then of course there's the I don't know if I've talked about it here or not, but there's a horror book that I was kind of working on. Originally I called it Eve, and it was actually very similar to the book Carrie, which is why I kind of pulled off of it after I read Carrie and realized how close it was. But I ended up changing that name from Eve to The Sound of Silence, and that was supposed to be a reference to some of the religious stuff that's in the book. And I was kind of like midway through it, so I'm kind of all over the place. It's just whenever I think I've got a title that, like, for the most part, really, encompasses the idea of the story, then I kind of stick with it. But sometimes it's difficult to find.
Well, it's as you were explaining yourself, I thought of another question like how connected does the title do you think have to be to the book? Obviously it has to have like a little bit of connection, but would you incorporate, like you said, you incorporated uh one of your favorite songs
Oh yeah,
and then you explained it within your story or you put it
yeah.
in your
Well,
story?
yeah. Like if you I don't remember exactly where you're at, but the song is referenced in the story somewhere, and
Okay.
I think it's early on I reference it, and so it kind of makes more sense over the course of the story. Um, but uh, yeah, that particular book was probably the hardest time I've ever had picking a title. Like I almost want to say that I didn't pick a title, but that I maybe settled for a title because I had written down maybe 20 different titles over the course of the production of it, I guess, or the development of it. And I never found like the perfect title that really stuck out to me, like kind of like the way that Fairly Human or the Enigmatic Marsden, those like were perfect. I would never change them, at least in my eyes. I mean, an outside perspective might have a different opinion, but I never had any moment like that with that particular book, the Somewhere Somehow book. So,
because I thought like calling my new story Irrational, using that because obviously I used it several times within the story, but I also felt it fit to like kind of hint to give the reader a hint that this is going to be something that's not always done, in a regular mindset. So I guess, would you say, could I have come up with a better title, do you think, within that? Like, since you've read the story, you know what happens. I mean, obviously this was going to help me critique my own work, but also, in general, setting up titles or making better titles.
um, hmm. I have to think about that one. Maybe. I mean, you could reference if you could find a way to reference the alcohol. Throughout the whole story, it seems like he's got the alcohol bottle or the liquor bottle kind of hidden in a bag, and then towards, I don't know if you do this intentionally, but I would assume so. But towards the end, like the bag falls off, and more truth, I guess you could say, is shown in a way. Like it almost feels like the bottled liquor is symbolic of the main character who's drinking a lot. You know what I mean? I don't know if that makes any sense, but
No, it does, and it was symbolic in more than one way too.
and if you could find a way to if you could find a title out of that, maybe perhaps that would require some more research.
And it would definitely help if other people said, okay, this title, just doesn't work, or it's too, I guess, easy or simple. But I sometimes simple is better.
Yeah,
you don't want to explain. You don't want to kind of give away your plot within the, in the title. I don't think, anyway.
Yeah, I think your current title works. I mean, I wouldn't worry about changing it. I mean, if I think of anything, I'll let you know. I can't. Nothing comes up off the top of my mind. Although I will say, if anyone's listening, if you read the story, or if you have read the story, leave a comment here or on the story page about what do you think. If you think that a better title, if you can think of a better title that more accurately or more in some way describes the story better, that could help with
Well, yeah, the only reason I'm focusing on this so much is I felt like this is one of my better writing stories that I've had. And so you want to kind of submit it to, some sort of literary magazine or an online thing. So, the more comments, critiques are definitely better. And it helps with that you've read it too, because you have a literary mind and understand what's going on too.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Just we pretend that we know what we're doing.
Yeah, that's mostly it. I just scribble stuff on a piece of paper, and then I call it a novel.
So how many titles, I guess, for your first novel, how many can you remember, how many that you came up with and then picked one, or was it
I don't know.
or maybe with any of them?
I mean, I will say with the most recent one, I want to say that I had at least 15 titles written down, and it just none of them felt right to me. None of them didn't sound well enough, or they weren't catchy enough. There's some like perfect thing that I don't know how to describe that I look for in a title, and none of what I wrote down worked the way that I wanted it to. I can't, with the first novel I wrote. I mean, I've got my writings over there on my old outlines, but I don't remember I don't remember spending too much time on the title for that one because like I started writing Fairly Human back in 2015, and I had the title picked out way back then. And I didn't actually publish it on Amazon until 2018. I think it was I can't remember when I really started writing it. I think it must have been 2017. But yeah, I had that one. I can't remember of any other uh titles. I want to say I was disqualified from just a fun fact. I was disqualified from some like writers competition because my title was misspelled because the term or the name Fairly Human, like the word fairly isn't actually a word technically. It was just like the word's supposed to be a play on fairly, like this person's fairly human, but they're not. I guess they're like fairly human, but also fairly feral. But like I reworded it as fairly, Ferally or LLY, something like that, and got disqualified because of that. It was stupid stuff, of course, but
Well, that shouldn't like make disqualification because it's the work of fiction, so you can call whatever you want it
yeah, I
to
mean it was a
be
free
called.
competition, so I didn't lose any money or anything.
Oh,
But it was still like I was like, okay, cool. I guess I won't use that name. And so I wrote a really short sequel to it, a little novella. It was like 17,000 words, and I called it the Triple Entente, which was a play on the alliance of World War I. And it was about, but it continued the story directly following Fairly Human. And I made sure to use a title that. I mean, it's just funny. I say that I made sure to use a title that was spelled correctly, but I also used a like entente as a French word, so that probably would have messed it up too. But uh, yeah, that was interesting. That was I think it was the first sequel I ever published, and it was not exactly what I wanted it to be. Sometimes I kind of struggle with whether or not I should keep that up because I don't feel like it's like the best quality work I could put out. Now, how do you feel about sequels?
like I was going to say, that's a good segue into sequels. That's why I asked about if I should do a sequel to mine. So you said yours wasn't up to what your standard.
Yeah, well, I think the issue with the sequel was that I think I was forcing myself to write too much, as opposed to just letting the content flow out naturally in a better environment. And so I think the quality suffered because of that. It was really short. Like I made sure not to do too much. Like I didn't want to just have a crap novel with a bunch of filler, unnecessary garbage. But at the same time, it was only the final product was only 17,000 words compared to the the first book, Fairly Human, which was I think 70,000 words. It was a huge difference, and I um that was something that always kind of didn't sit right with me. And then also the whole story was just kind of rushed. And um I think I want like I partly want to go back and rewrite it, but I don't know if that's something that I should do, considering it's been out for 2 years now, I think, maybe three. But now I find myself doing a lot of sequels. Like I want to work on another sequel to Fairly Human. I made a sequel to that book, The Enigmatic Mars, and I want to I kind of also want to do some more original content. Have you made any sequels to your short stories, or do you just start with
Yes,
something
I
new?
have one.
Mhm.
The first one I ever published called Remembrance, and then a sequel to that I published like four in between, and then I that was the first sequel I think I've ever written, and then I put it, then I called made a story called Closure, and I was even thinking about making a third one, but I don't know. Again, I don't know that I don't really want to take away from the first two, especially the first one, because I got a lot of good feedback from it. So that's why I'm always afraid of like doing a sequel because I don't want to take away if the say the sequel is just utter crap.
Yeah,
I don't want to take away the from the original that actually worked out really well and it was very successful. So it's tough for me want to write sequels or attempt them, but I get it's that's like one thing as a writer, you have to get out of your comfort zone at some point and just try it. Because you know, if you don't
Yeah,
try it, no, you won't know really
yeah. I mean,
if it works or not.
it's definitely worth trying like a full on sequel at least once. I mean, like definitely some stories, you shouldn't write a sequel to it. You know, if the story is complete, then and that's that. Uh, I think it's like the very first novel that I wrote technically ended on a cliffhanger. So like, it was designed to be followed up with a sequel. Like I actually had, I want to say, four sequels planned for that book. It was going to be a big project, and when the first sequel kind of just flopped, in my opinion, not necessarily in terms of sales, but just in terms of my own perception of the quality of it, I just kind of lost interest in it. And that's when I ended up moving on to my second project, which I wrote that novel and then a sequel to that novel as well, which a sequel ended up being I was always nervous about the sequel because I always feel like the sequel needs to be, at the very least, it should be as good as the original story. You want to shoot for that same level of quality, a story that serves a purpose. Like there's no point in writing an extended epilogue of the previous story if that's all it is. It has to be its own self-contained, adventure. And so I wrote that sequel, and I think it was okay. I don't know if it was as good as the first one, but I definitely don't plan on going back to that series anytime soon. I want to go back to, well, I have two new projects I want to work on. I've got the dystopian climate future project, and then the the story that sounds a lot like Carrie. It's got this, not, I want to say crazy lady, but crazy lady basically. Um, I've released shorts of that, or I've released like previews of it on my website, I believe. So feel free to check it out, and to anyone that's listening, let me know if it's worth doing or not. But I also have actually clips, or like I have previews of the dystopian climate future as well. That one, I don't know. That one's going to be an interesting project, but I don't know. I want to stay away from sequels for a while because I feel like I do too many sequels. If you focus too often on sequels, you end up not having a lot of original content. So, like for example, you've got a lot of separate self-contained stories, and I've got like three novels and that short novella, and so it's four total, and they're both basically just two separate franchises. So like, or separate, whatever you want to call them, two separate universes. So I need more original projects, but
Well, I know with my novel, I want to have like it's going to be a series because that's mine's going to end with a cliffhanger too. So I was thinking like at least three, maybe four, but I have to get that far still.
mm,
I have
it
to actually work on. I have to actually open up the Word, Microsoft Word page document,
yeah,
and actually start typing.
it can be daunting sometimes because like for me, I'll when I'm writing anything, I shoot for this specific, like I kind of want to like pass the threshold of like 50,000 words roughly. If I can. Obviously I failed on that one novella. I only made it 17,000 words, but I shoot for I shoot to go way beyond that if I can. Like the first book I wrote, but um, it's always interesting to like hit maybe like 56 or 57,000 words. And then you start rereading it and it's like, oh, well, I've repeated myself here. I need to cut this out. Or when you realize you have an entire chapter adds nothing of value and then you have to cut that out. And the next thing you know, you're down to like 49,000 words. And it's like, oh, well, not
Do
much
you
left.
do you try to add? You fix it or you just leave it?
It depends. If I'll look through it for opportunities as I'm editing it to like I say, I think one of the things that I have, that one of my problems is that I don't develop characters enough, or I don't develop certain stories enough. So a lot of the times there's content that I just blew past that can be expanded. And that's one of the things I work on when I edit, is that if something's not entirely clear, or if one character's motivations weren't properly represented, I can, fix it, so to speak. Because that's one thing I've noticed in my last two books, is that I just it's one of those things where like you as the writer, you know what's going on, but the reader also has to know. And a lot of the times I don't make it so that the reader can know. And so I kind of have to keep that in check. And that in doing so, that adds more words, sometimes more chapters if need be, and kind of balances out the loss of all the, you know, repeated words or the excess dialogue or excess exposition, whatever. So, and I always shoot for the highest quality without adding in, like, I won't add like unnecessary crap just to make it, just to hit like a certain point. It's kind of like,
So
it's like when you're playing darts and you want to hit the bullseye, but like if you don't hit it, then you don't hit it.
yeah. So I guess if you say you have uh, your first series, you want to make it into four, right?
Yeah.
Like, okay. So if you write the sequel and it's just not good, will you continue to do the third one anyway, or were you going to stop?
So
Because
I
like Pirates of the Caribbean, the first one was the best movie, and they made like what, four more,
yeah, I think more than that. I think this
five more,
is a lot. Yeah.
and they weren't very good. I mean, I didn't see a lot of them, but from the feedback that people have told me, they're like, yeah, no, it's not very good.
But with that first series, like the first sequel, the one that I wrote was a direct sequel, but the third and fourth one were going to be more standalone-ish, I guess. It was more independent, I guess. Like the third one was going to involve going over the story of the guy that's kind of, he didn't start the whole feral virus pandemic that happened in the novel, but he was like patient zero basically. And that novel was going to go over him, and it was going to show what happened to him before everything happened, and how he ended up becoming this guinea pig, and how he escaped this convoy and spread the virus. And it shows him coming into contact with the main character of Fairly Human, the first book. And it was gonna kind of tie in that way, but it's gonna be more. It's gonna be its own story as opposed to a direct sequel, just a you know something like that. And then the fourth story was going to be like, it's supposed to be like several years into the future, and the federal government had collapsed, and there's this dystopian sort of post-apocalyptic world where nuclear weapons had been used, and there were these raider gangs. I mean, I was heavily inspired by the Fallout games when I wrote that. So I had this whole series. I think it was called, or this whole story was called A World of Dread and Fear, and it was supposed to be this area called the Badlands. And that's is in the same universe, but kind of its own thing. Not really at all related to that first novel. So, but I don't know if that answered your question or not.
No, I mean, so it's just kind of like maybe you
Yeah.
might want to do it. It all depends on what.
So that last story I talked about in the Badlands, I still want to do it. That's probably what I'm
Okay.
going to work on next, or some kind of version of that. So yes, I still want to do it.
Okay. So for me, like if I wrote a sequel to the story I just published and it just didn't get as much positive feedback, they said you sound repetitive. It kind of like doesn't really fit in well. Then I would definitely sit back and maybe be like, I don't know if I would write a third one if I even if I projected to. So I guess it's for me. I guess it's part of me is like quote unquote selling out to make the most kind of money. So
uh,
if I'm gonna, or the most views or whatever, so I'm not gonna try not to put out something that's crappy and then continue to put something else that is equally crappy to connect it all together. Oh, I don't.
that is a smart way to do it. I mean,
Yeah.
I always, I probably should be the same way. I can't help but just write whatever I, enjoy, I guess. It's like I don't know, not, I don't know how to word it correctly. Like I'm just gonna write whatever I want to write in the moment, you know. And oftentimes, I wouldn't be surprised if oftentimes I'm like writing stories that might not necessarily be the most in demand. Like that Fairly Human book was basically a zombie post-apocalyptic story, but it came um, it came when those types of stories I feel like were just not in demand at all. Like the idea of zombies, like The Walking Dead, like that whole entire um, genre was just kind of in decline. It was overdone. People were done with
Yes.
it, and so like right at the butt end of that, I'm like, hey, here's my novel. And uh, you know, not the smartest thing to do, but like I love the story. Like Fairly Human, like I remember thinking it was not good, but then I reread it earlier this year to do some updates and bring it up to a higher quality, and I actually enjoyed it a lot more than I remembered it. And that's part of what got me wanting to go back to it. But I don't know.
That's what I'm afraid of. Like it's all like you said with the zombie. What was that show called?
Oh, The Walking Dead.
The Walking Dead. How it was just overdone. Everything was
Mm, yeah, I used to love that
overused,
show.
and that's what I'm afraid of. Like using the same sort of scenarios or feelings, or oh, you write this four
Yeah,
times. Like you wrote the same sort of scene, but it's in a different setting or whatever,
yeah. What am I
or a
mostly
different time.
like with The Walking Dead? I was using that as like uh, a representative of like the whole genre or the whole like zombie bubble. Like The Walking Dead. I remember it blew up early on, like the first 3 4 years, but post 2015, like the whole zombie fandom or whatever, it was gone. It was dying. Like you know, Call of Duty, they dabbled in their zombies, the Black Ops zombies, but then like it's kind of just dead. But like with your stories are, well, I know your novels predominantly like a crime drama and a detective kind of story, and I don't think that that's necessarily. Um, I don't think it's ever going to go away, but yeah. So you kind of froze there for a second.
Oh, I can still see you.
You kind of like you did this thing where you're like, I don't know, okay. But let's back into it.
Well, I guess that I also have to try to get out of my own head. Just be like, okay, who cares? Like, it's the whole purpose of writing and putting all your stuff out there is just to like so you see yourself known, and it's like, okay, not everything is going to be perfect, not everything is going to be, even if you think it's three-quarters of everybody saying, oh, this is great, you're still going to have a quarter of people who don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just, you're not going to have 100%
Yeah.
fan base backing on it. So that's part of me. It's like, maybe I write 3 or 4 more stories connected to this first one and see what happens,
Yeah.
or I back out and stay in my comfort zone. It's like read it, like just like genres that we've touched on before.
Yeah. Like I feel like for me predominantly, like when I write, I write, and when I write, I have the intention of putting it out there and saying, letting people, read it or buy it or whatever. But I mostly write for myself. I feel like that might be I don't know if it's a problem necessarily, but I have to, I guess, balance that with what an audience might want, because like a lot of the stories that I write, they're they're just stories that I think are just really, really good, really cool in my head, and so I just want to have that realized in the real world. So, but yeah, getting out of the comfort zone is definitely uh, not easy sometimes, but that is how we grow. Like for example, when I first started writing first person, I had been writing third person the entire time, and that was uh, it was a weird transition at first, but when I finally got into it, it was just really good time.
Huh. I can't remember what I started with. I can't remember if I have like the first thing was third person or not. Man, that's tough.
Yeah, I still have the very first story that I wrote in first person. It was I remember every time I write a story, I'm like, this is the best thing I've ever written. And I write something else, and I go back and I'm like, that's crap. But
Sometimes I feel like that. Sometimes I don't. Like I know one story I was like, this is good, this is pretty good, but not 100%. But I threw it out there anyway, compared to others that are out on my website. But I want to say, I know we talked about our first ever writings, and I feel like the Candyland one was first person. I want to say it was first person, but I don't know. It was so long ago. That computer is beyond junk that it's been incinerated.
yeah,
Probably for the best. No one needs to read that kind of garbage.
maybe, but it's always cool to take a trip down memory lane. I mean,
Yeah.
I personally, I don't think I'll ever reread my first works that I still have, but you know, I like to just look at it and be like, hey, it's there. It exists in physical form still. One of these days, if I ever happen to make it big, I'll frame it and I'll be like, this is where it all started.
Like your
With
first
this,
dollar.
yeah, yeah, my first time. But yeah, yeah. I mean, what were we talking about? I just had a dementia moment.
Sequels.
Sequels, yeah. The
Sequels, and
sequels.
I guess
On the
I
flip
guess
side,
I guess
oh,
what we
but
really want to summarize, it sounds like we would both do it regardless. Like even if the sequel, like continue to write sequels, even if the first one was bad.
mhm.
I would be more hesitant than you, but I think in the end I'd be like, okay, let's just try it. One, just for shits and giggles, I guess.
Well, here's a little turn of events. What about prequels? Kind of in the same vein, you know.
I've never written a prequel.
Technically, one of the what that one book I was talking about the patient zero for Fairly Human, that technically was kind of a prequel. Now that I think about it, although it began before the book started and kind of led into it. But I've written short stories that were prequels to other short stories that not that none that are available. They're all like my old junk stories, but uh, I find prequels to be kind of fun, to be honest, because you can essentially go back in time and sort of reset the stage in a way. Sometimes you can introduce like I've written a number of prequels that um, I need to publish one. A number of prequels that they I don't know they're fun. You take this existing like world and this existing history, and then like obviously you have some of that history is known in the original works, whatever. But then you go back in time and you can kind of reference, or you can actually write about the history that's referenced in those future books, whatever. You know what I mean? I don't know if I'm explaining this correctly or not, but I think prequels are they're fun. You should try
Hmm.
writing your next if you do write um, another second person, you should write a prequel to the what to Irrational.
Hmm.
We should just give it a shot. See,
That'd be, yeah. You know what? Because I was trying to over the week. I'm like, maybe I'll try to do some other second person stories, and then it's like, okay, but maybe not. I might have just had that one hit wonder sort of thing in my head anyway. But yeah,
but
again, it never hurts to give it a shot.
it sounds like for Irrational, there was a this was like something pivotal happened in that main character's life in the past. And so if you write the story about that moment, that pivotal moment in the prequel,
And it doesn't even have to be 5 pages. It could
yeah,
be two, three.
one
So
and a half, whatever, however you want to do it.
yeah, that's an idea.
Yeah.
I,
I mean,
I actually
if you ever
might
find
actually
yourself,
try it. Yeah.
if you get bored, I enjoy prequels. I don't know why I haven't written one or where I haven't published one yet. Uh, I could easily, well, I will one of these days. In the next 10 years, I will publish a prequel to a future book. I promise.
You know,
I'll make that announcement here.
now that you've like explained that, and I'm sitting back and just kind of like filtering out ideas in my head, it's like, okay, it might work. Honestly, it might work.
Yeah. I mean, for anyone that's read Irrational or who is going to read Irrational, you'll think, man, this guy has it tough right now, but something worse happened, or something probably worse happened before all this, At least that's my takeaway from it.
It I don't want to give it away, but
don't give it away.
I'm curious to like what people, how they like understand it.
It's very ambiguous. I'll say that. Like I couldn't tell you exactly what. I mean, if I had to guess, would you want me to guess? I could say
guess. You can guess off camera. I don't want to give it away. Guess after we're done with recording.
Tell you the good story. If you haven't read it yet, what's wrong with you? What are you doing with your life? Read it.
You should be reading. You should be reading Todd's short stories too.
It's
you need to self-promote pretty well.
It's irrational to read my works. It's rational to read his story. Irrational.
No, you see, I've been like, the only reason why, again, I've been promoting myself a lot on this episode is because I felt really good about it. Usually most of them I'm like, okay, this is pretty good, but it could be better. But you need to like self-promote your short stories, especially if you feel like one of them is pretty, like you're trying to understand if you want to expand on something.
One thing I haven't talked about on here, if I'm going to do any self-promotion, is I don't know if I talked about it. I might have. I don't think I did though. It's a collection of short stories that I wrote back in 2018, I believe. The series is called Archer's Conundrum. It'll all make sense if you read every short story, but it's basically this. Each story is connected in some way, but I think there's 11 total stories, and 11 total stories. The first, I guess, story 2 through 9, they're all like their own thing for the most part. Separate genres. You've got short stories that take place in space, some that take place in medieval times, some that take place in dystopian futures where there's, AI, robots, and stuff like that. It's kind of all over the place. And but they're each kind of connected to this guy named Archer. I forget his first name. I think I named him Sterling Archer originally, and then I remembered, oh yeah, there's a TV show called Archer whose main character's name is Sterling Archer. So I had to change it. I can't remember what it's called, but what its name is. But it's a neat little series. I actually enjoyed writing those. Some of them I actually wanted to turn into screenplays at one point because they were kind of short. It would have made good short film scripts. Although some of them, the ones that take place in space, it'd be hard to film those without a studio, of course. But yeah, those are pretty cool. The Fairly Human book is probably still my pride and glory, I would say, because that one was kind of my favorite genre at the time, and it still is now. It's action-y, adventure-y, dystopian.
Well, that's the baby too. That's the first one.
First published one. Yeah. I technically wrote a book before that I don't know if I've told you about it. It was the book was called Taking Control, and it was basically a mob story, heavily inspired from some short stories that I had written over the last 10 or so years. The ones
I think you might have touched on it. You said you were in the mobster genre for a while. GTA.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So I had written all these short stories based off of those. And then I took all those ideas and the characters and all that stuff. And that was my attempt to make a standalone original book. And I'm dropping any reference to the Grand Theft Auto games. It's Taking Control. It was about, these crime families. Some of the stories were pretty good, but I don't know if I ever actually intended to publish it. I just wanted to write it. There are people that say also you should never publish your first book. So I consider that, me not publishing my first book.
That's not a good sign.
Although, also I wrote that back in 2013. So I was like 18, I think, when I finished writing it, maybe 19. But it wasn't that bad. I'll say that. Although I wrote it all out in a composition notebook. So, it would be a huge pain to actually publish it on a digital format. So unlikely to ever see the internet or anything. But so yeah, that was my original baby book, and then Fairly Human was kind of like the older brother that kind of got or the younger brother, I guess. I don't know whatever you want to call it. The one that got all the spotlight, the one that made it through. And yeah, have my preferred genres: post-apocalyptic, you know, big like crazy government, and then that's responsible for this, bioweapon leak. It's kind of funny that like back then when I was writing that, it was 2015, so it was before any of the political things that have happened over the last 6 years. And then like you end up with, you know, civil unrest, pandemic, and luckily no zombies, luckily no nuclear weapons, but it's been interesting for that to happen.
Well, there was a nuclear threat, right? The beginning of 2020 or something, right? And
20
something there were these memes that World War III was going to happen.
oh yeah. I mean there were a lot of memes for that because we randomly bombed some general from another country, and
that's
people
right.
are like, oh, here we go. 3 times the charm.
Let's not get into that. This is not a political podcast, but yes, a lot of stuff has happened since you've published that novel.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, specifically since I started writing, I published it in 2018.
Okay. Since you started writing it. Yeah. So maybe you should become a psychic on the side.
I don't know. I mean, maybe. Perhaps. I'll buy some tarot cards, and then maybe we can do that as like an intermission, in between sections of the podcast. I can deliver a reading to the audience,
Or if we ever have a live show, we could have reading cards.
Not necessarily if, but when.
When.
You see, I can see the future, and I do know that there will be a live show at some point. I don't know when, other than the future.
The future.
Which is sometime after tomorrow, for sure.
I think on that note, we should sign off.
Wow, I feel a little offended by that. I don't like my rambling. Okay, yeah. It's been a long time. It's been like 2 hours. This podcast is probably hitting the 3-hour mark at this point. This is like an actual Joe Rogan podcast here.
This is a Joe Rogan
the DMT and other stuff, but
other yelling and shouting. I mean, we could start shouting. Leave in the comments below if you want us to start shouting.
Yeah. Leave a nice yell or scream in the comments. Just if you can. It helps, believe it or not. Any interaction with the comments or with whatever, it's positive. It's we enjoy it. I have been waiting anxiously for a comment. We haven't gotten one yet, as of recording at least, and I'm getting quite lonely. I need somebody to converse with on the internet, on the YouTube comments. And I'm begging, just say hi. We can chat for a bit. I could talk about why Andy's hat says title. It could be like
the star of the episode.
Exactly. Yeah. But yeah. On that note, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Hit that like button. Click subscribe if you want to get more of this content delivered to you in the future. Hit the notification button so that it hits your notification mailbox. Share it. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your church members or your community members. Spray paint on the sides of buildings, Writer's Block podcast.
Buy a t-shirt.
Make sure you specify which one, because there's apparently 100 different Writer's Block podcasts on YouTube.
Make sure you add the parenthesis in the right part.
Yeah. What he said. And then also make sure you come back for the next one, because you're not going to want to miss this stuff. No. I mean, where else can you hear us conversating unless you're, listening above or something like that? I don't know, some other spooky stuff. I don't know. Got any?
It is Halloween.
It is Halloween season. Well, the real question: will it still be Halloween when this episode airs? Ooh. I honestly don't know. I think it'll actually be October 29th when this
I
fires.
think so. I think it's going to be
So
right around
yeah. So
Halloween when it
if
publishes.
that's the case, which I'm like 95% sure it is. Have a happy Halloween. Stay safe out there.
Yes.
Get some candy. Get a Butterfinger. Those things are underrated these days. What was that face? I saw that face, Andy, and
I,
it did not look like a good
I
face.
like Butterfingers. I just was
I
not
don't believe
expecting.
you. I don't believe you
I
at all.
do.
You look
I
like
do.
more like you like those crunch bars more than anything. You're a crunch guy, aren't you?
I am not. I do dabble in crunch bars, but the only ones I don't like are Mounds, Almond Joy, and Thin Mints.
Sounds like you don't like mints or coconuts.
Okay, I like mint. We're not getting into this, but I like mint gum and Lifesavers.
I'm gonna rephrase everything I said. You're gonna get one of those Werther's originals. That's what you're into. Okay, you like those caramel candies, in the glass jar.
I
They're
mean,
good.
they are good. I don't know if they're a number. I don't know. I don't know if they're the number one go-to candy in my eyes, but it's up to be debated at a different time.
Well, on that note,
There was a long pause because he didn't believe me and he was giving me a look of deceivement.
deceivement is a look of doubt. That was a look of doubt. Well, also, I guess I'll throw this out there. If it's October 29th also, and you're looking for a good show to watch on Netflix that's kind of scary, I highly recommend a new show on Netflix called Midnight Mass. It's pretty good. It's not too scary, but it fits the Halloween sort of vibe. So that's my parting note. Andy, would you like to add anything else? You
Oh,
want to give the
just
you want to give the final goodbye, or you want me to do it?
I will give the final goodbye. I just want to say appreciate you guys listening and watching and subscribing, and we will see you next week.
Oh, that's it.
That's it.
Oh, okay. Well, okay. In that case.